Hello in Seattle. I'm Nauja Bianco, and I'm sitting here in Copenhagen. Unfortunately, I couldn't be able to join you in Seattle today, but I'll try to do my best in convening some information with regards to Greenland for the Nordic Innovation Summit at the National Nordic Museum in Seattle. So today I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about Geopolitics, the Inuit name for Greenland. And I'll try to run through modern history, politics, and society for you. Again, my name is Nauja Bianco. I term myself a global Greenlander or an international Inuit. And in a minute, I'll tell you why. Just wanted to show you a map of Greenland and also the proximity to Iceland and Canada. You get the good idea when looking at this map. What I want to try to run through, and I only have about 10-15 minutes to do so, is to give a brief introduction of myself, then give an introduction to Geopolitics, Greenland, and then I found it important to do a brief walkthrough of modern history of Greenland, with a focus on the Second World War, the introduction of home rule government and self-rule government in Greenland. And then I thought it was important to look into Greenland's foreign security policy that came out in 2024, and obviously the international attention for Greenland and what I've termed that whole buying Greenland thing, which is obviously very connected to the current US administration. And then I'll talk a bit about the whole theme for the Nordic Innovation Summit, which is resilience. So a little bit about myself. I'm Nauja Bianco. I, again, call myself an international Inuit or a global Greenlander. I was born and raised in the capital of Nuuk in Greenland, which now has about 20,000 inhabitants. That was a little less when I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. I've been living several places, and that's why I term myself international Inuit and global Greenlander. I've lived in Denmark. I studied in Denmark. A lot of people from Greenland do that, basically to get access to educational system. Then I've lived in the US. I spent a year as an exchange student in Northern California. Then I've lived in Brussels, worked as a diplomat for the Greenlandic government, working with EU relations. Then I've also lived in Toronto, Canada. And now I am living in Copenhagen, Denmark. I have a master in political science, and I've worked as a civil servant, an official, and a diplomat for a number of years, not only for the Greenlandic government, but also for the Danish government and the Nordic governments in an intergovernmental cooperation called the Nordic Council of Ministers. Today, I am an independent consultant and a board member, and I view myself as facilitating cooperation, connecting dots vis-a-vis Greenland on various areas, business, politics, culture, etc. And then I also view myself as an educator. So, brief history of Greenland in milestones. I'll start in 1721. Because that's a pivotal moment in Greenlandic history and its history with Denmark. In 1721, the missionary Hans Egede arrives in Western Greenland, and that becomes the beginning of the colonization of Greenland. That takes place basically up until the beginning of the Second World War, where Denmark is cut off from Greenland. And in that situation, the connection between Greenland and the US starts. Basically, what happens is that the US takes over responsibility for Greenland and making sure that supplies can come into Greenland. In 1948, relatively shortly after the war, the Danish Prime Minister Hans Hedtoft visits Greenland. And on behalf of that visit, he proposes a plan for modernization of Greenland. He does that in the context of the establishment of the United Nations and the pressure for decolonizing the whole world, basically. So Denmark is part of that process where former colonizers have to give up on their colonies. So it's in that light that he proposes the modernization of Greenland. In 1953, there's a constitutional change in the Kingdom of Denmark, and Greenland is, I've termed it, formally decolonized, and it gets a status of a county, if you will, so sort of a separate status, but still within the Kingdom of Denmark. I've just mentioned the G50 and the G60 policies, which are basically the industrialization and modernization policies that lay the ground for modernization of Greenland. This takes place for about 20 years. And in 1979, there is a political movement towards more autonomy, self-autonomy in Greenland, and that leads to the Home Rule Act. And I'll get back to what that is in just a second. And then we have the Home Rule Agreement for about 30 years, and that leads to the Self-Rule Act in 2009, which is basically an advancement of the autonomy that was given and utilized in 1979. So the Home Rule government from 1979, there was a clear wish from the Greenlandic population for Home Rule. And basically what it does is that it provided the Greenlandic government with, or the Greenlandic society with a parliament and a government. And then it enabled the Greenlandic people to take over responsibility of some of the key areas for Greenland. Some of them that I've mentioned here, it's education, culture, fisheries, environment, and so forth. There are still a lot of areas where Greenland did not have competency, foreign and security policy being one. Now I jump to the Self-Rule Act of 2009. So as you see here, it is actually the Danish Queen Margrethe II handing over the Self-Rule Act to the chair of the Greenlandic Parliament, Josef Motzfeldt. And again, we saw a political movement in Greenland with a clear wish for more autonomy and a clear wish for self-government, or an increase of self-government. What's important in the Self-Rule Act is that the act recognizes the Greenlandic people, Kalaallit as we also call ourselves, as a people with the right to self-determination. Then it also recognizes the possibility for taking over several sectors that have been under Danish responsibility. And last but not least, the Self-Rule Act gave the opportunity for Greenland to take over the mineral resource area, which had been a joint decision-making area between Greenland and Denmark so far. In the interest of time, I want to talk a little bit about the increasing international attention. So throughout, let's say, the past 10, 15 years, we've seen an increase in international attention when it comes to the Arctic in general. That relates to, first and foremost, the whole agenda around climate change. But it also relates to the opening up of possibilities and potential threats in the Arctic and the North Atlantic with global warming. So we've seen an increase in international attention towards Arctic and Greenland throughout the past 10, 15 years. But this interest really increases, if you will, let's say from 2019 during the first Trump administration and onwards. So we've had a lot of visits in Greenland. There are 57,000 inhabitants. So you can imagine also how big or how small the different administrations are. So having visits from all over the world all the time is somewhat demanding of a small nation and a small administration. That, among other things, led to the establishment of a new strategy from the Greenlandic government side. It's called Nothing About Us Without Us. And basically, it's Greenland's first foreign and defense strategy alongside with the international policy strategy. And that came out in February of 2024. In that strategy, there's generally a strong focus to the West, towards Canada and the US. And then there's a desire to establish a more sort of people-to-people and government-to-government cooperation with what's termed the Arctic North American Forum. There's a desire to see Canada establish a consulate in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. And the other way around, a desire to establish a representation in Ottawa. The EU is obviously mentioned as an important partner, but that is not mentioned in very strong terms. But I'll get back to that in a second. Then there's a mentioning, obviously, of the Nordic cooperation. And then there's a very strong emphasis on Greenland wanting to prioritize areas where it gives benefits from that cooperation, and where Greenland is also recognized as an equal member with the right to speak and vote under its own flag and delegations, which is a deliberate policy towards independence. And just to say that, the general reaction and position is that Greenland is not for sale, not for anybody. Some of the reactions in Greenland towards the, if you will, offer, quote unquote, from President Trump was really a very strong political mobilization. So what we saw in the two biggest towns of Greenland was demonstrations. And here I've just put in some photos from the demonstration taking place in Nuuk. And again, with very clear messages saying, we are not for sale. Obviously, the pressure around this question has been immense. It started in December 2024 when President Trump started mentioning that he would buy Greenland or he would acquire Greenland one way or the other. We had had the same experience in 2019 and thought really that this was over and done with. But the pressure just became more and more immense. Donald Trump Jr. visited Greenland in January 7, 2025. And then I would say throughout January and the next 3 months, we had this pressure with different messages going back and forth over the Atlantic Ocean about whether or not the US could actually acquire Greenland one way or the other, either economically, financially, or military. Again, the Greenlandic reactions were very clear. Greenland is not for sale. On the left-hand side, you see a Greenlandic politician who is a part of the Danish parliament. Her name is Aya Kimnitz. She was all over the media stating we're not for sale, but we could be open for business. And that has really been the line from the Greenlandic government all the way through. On the right-hand side, you see the former premier or prime minister of Greenland, who basically had the same message. So where are we today? Right now, from the US administration or President Trump's side, it's relatively quiet at the moment. but I think everybody is expecting a new move in the near future. So what has happened between the Greenlandic and Danish relationship is really that it has mobilized people and it has strengthened the relationship between Naalakkersuisut, which is the Greenlandic government, and the Danish government. There is no doubt that that the Danish government will stand alongside Greenland and back up Greenland in all possible ways. And we see that in various forms and shapes currently. And we see an enormous interest in Greenland from the Danish side that we've never seen before. Then there's also work on the diplomatic lines, especially when it comes to strengthening the relationship to the EU. The EU is also acutely aware of the need for, if you will, keeping Greenland in the fold and taking care of Greenland in that overall European sphere. What we've also seen is an enormous increase from the Danish government side in NATO spending, including just this Friday, we saw an extra spending in the Arctic and Greenland, around $4 billion in defense spending, which will be spent on new planes, new surveillance methods, drones, ships, and so forth. So we are going into, if you will, we've always been living with a demilitarization as a goal, but we're basically moving away from that with the current environment. On the other hand, we see an increase in US public spending in critical raw materials projects, including a project in Greenland, in southern Greenland. So just to say that there's still an endeavor from some parts of the US to actually get a foothold into Greenland. Again, coming back to the whole theme of this conference or this get-together is resilience. And I want to touch a little bit upon the notion of resilience. So I chose some photos here just to show you some of the reactions that came towards the proposition of acquiring Greenland. One very strong resilience factor is that the Greenlandic people has fought for decades to achieve autonomy and self-determination. And the Greenlandic people is not willing to give up on that. It's been a tough ride to get to where we are now. And the Greenlandic people does not want a new colonization. So we stand very firm on that. And I think one of the strengths about the Greenlandic people is that the Inuit is really a collective people, and we stand together. And it has shown throughout this this year, or the all that's been going on in 2025, that the Greenlandic people really also stands together with the Danish people. So even though there are political differences and difference in ways of wanting to develop societies, there really is a very strong relationship between Greenland and Denmark that goes on to also strengthening the relationship between Greenland and the EU. And I am, if you will, hopeful that that we will stay strong and find modalities when a new proposition should arrive from the US. Qujanaq, that means thank you in Greenlandic. Because I'm not present, I obviously can't take questions, but should you have any, or should you want to follow my work, or should you be interested in more about Greenland, you can find me on LinkedIn, just under my name, Nauja Bianco. And you're also welcome to send me an email. I wrote my email down here. Again, apologies for not being able to be in Seattle. I hope you have a very fruitful Nordic Innovation Summit. I love the environment around Nordic Innovation Summit. I love the museum. I was there at the opening, was very honored to be part of that. And I think it does a tremendous job in communicating about the outside world, not the least the Nordic countries, and in this case, Greenlandic. So I'm wishing you a fruitful and constructive summit. Take care. Bye.